Hello, fourth graders. Welcome to lesson 12.1, Measurement Benchmarks. In chapter 12, we're going to be learning about converting different measurements in both U.S. customary units and in the metric system. Please copy down this chart. I'm going to be providing you with some examples of the different types of units that are involved in measuring liquid, length, and weight and mass, both in U.S. customary units and metric units, so that way we know what units we're working with for this chapter. So here are some examples of the different types of units that we use when we're referring to length, liquid volume, weight, and mass for U.S. units. And below are the metric units, and we're going to get into more detail of these later on. But when we're referring to length, we're talking about meters, liquid volume is liters, and weight and mass is going to be grams. So we do have some of these units in US. So if you are talking about medicine, or if you go to the grocery store and are buying some pop, you might see liters of pop. So these do kind of mix together and not necessarily just stay in other countries. We do incorporate a mixture of all of these units here in the US. So let's start working in our book. We're going to be on page 641 and looking at some of these benchmark units. So if you look at this chart here, they have references for you to think about how long these units are. So if you think about an inch, it's about that part of your finger. 1 foot, always reference a ruler on your head, but if you can't picture that, and you can reference a license plate that's about a foot long. 1 yard is about the length of 1 baseball bat, and 1 mile is about how long it might take you to walk in about 20 minutes. Now that's not speed walking or turtle walking. That's about an average pace to take you about 20 minutes to walk 1 mile. Some might be faster than others, but just a general sense, that's what you can use to reference how long 1 mile is. So let's look at this problem at the top. Jake says the length of his bike is about 4 yards. Use the benchmark units below to determine if that statement is reasonable. So again, thinking about the length of a yard is about the length of 1 baseball bat. So if he thinks that his regular bicycle is 4 yards long, we have to think about, does it make sense or not? So I disagree, and I think that Jake's statement is not reasonable. There's no way that a regular bicycle can be 4 baseball bats long. That's just a really long bike. So if you think about, okay, picture a bike in your head, picture a baseball bat, lining them up from end to end. It could be about 2 bats. We can get more specific and say it's about 1.5 baseball bats long. So again, these aren't going to be very specific, but they should be a reasonable estimate of how long this bike should be or how long this distance should be. Moving on to benchmark units of liquid volume. So again, this is stuff that we see in our grocery store, in our kitchens, and our job is to figure out about how much liquid is in a mug of hot chocolate. So looking at these pictures up here, referencing these, think about your average cup in your cupboard and how much liquid it can hold. And we're going to go with about 1 cup. All the other ones are just too big. And last, U.S. customary units of weight, ounces, pounds, and tons. So 1 pencil, if you hold in your hand, your average size pencil is about 1 ounce. If you hold an entire loaf of bread, it's about 1 pound, and a car, which you will not be holding, is about 1 ton. So our job is to figure out about how much does a grapefruit weigh. So again, it's not getting into, well, there's different size grapefruits. It's thinking about the average size of all of these things and looking at ounces, pounds, or tons, and which one is most appropriate, which is about 1 pound. Next, we're going to talk about the metric units. So metric units are used in different countries, and they all deal with powers of 10. The biggest metric unit is the kilo. So it is the biggest one, and we represent this by using a capital letter K. Next one is hecto. Next smallest one is deca, abbreviated by using a capital D and a lowercase a. Next one is where all of our units are. So it is meters, liters, and grams. So you can attach kilo in front of the meters and do kilometers or kilometers, and that's telling you that that is a length. You can attach hecto to liters and telling you that that's a liquid amount. And grams, like we know, is a reference of mass, so that's talking about weight. So we can attach any of these other prefixes over here in front of these units to differentiate between length, liquid volume, or mass. So these really are the base of everything. We can think about this as our starting point. And then we continue to get smaller and less than one whole on the right side of the units, which is deci. The next smaller one is centi, which you've probably heard of centimeters on a ruler. And the smallest is the milli. So you've heard of millimeters, milliliters, and milligrams. These are all, again, their way of measuring it in other countries, and they all are powers of 10. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Below in purple, I've given you the value of each one of these, and as you can see, if you move from the right to the left, they are increasing 10 times greater. And if you move from the left to the right, they are decreasing by 10 times greater. Makes using this system really easy when you don't have to worry about how many decameters is in a kilometer, because they all are in powers of 10. So as long as you can remember the order of them, then your life is easy peasy. One way to remember these is to think about the saying, King Henry doesn't usually drink chocolate milk. But we'll get into more details about how to use these and convert these measurements later on this chapter. Here are the benchmarks. So we're talking about just length. So we're only referencing units that have the ending of meters in them. You see how the prefixes in all of these are different, but they all end in meter because we're talking about length. The other ones are talking about mass and liquid. So a millimeter, we see those on rulers. Centimeter is about the width of your finger. A decimeter is about the width from your thumb to the other side of your hand. A meter is about the width of an average sized door. And a kilometer is about how much you can walk in about 10 minutes. So again, these are just kind of ways to get you thinking about how big or small these sizes are. Our question is to think about, is the length of your classroom greater or less than 1 kilometer? So think about, is it going to take you about 10 minutes to walk from one side of your classroom to the other side? Definitely not. So therefore, it is less than 1 kilometer. Next, we're going to be talking about liquid volume. So we have milliliter and liter. So we have words that end in liter because, again, we're talking about liquid. So our job is to figure out how much medicine is usually in a medicine bottle. Is it going to be about 120 of these little pipettes or 120 water bottles in your average size medicine bottle? Definitely 120 milliliters, and you can abbreviate that by doing a lowercase m and a capital L. And last metric, units of mass, is the grams. So think about the weight, how heavy the dollar is. That's about the weight of 1 gram. And how heavy a baseball bat is, or average size baseball. That's going to be how heavy a kilogram is. So remember that a gram is 1 and a kilogram is going to be 1,000 of those. So if you had $1,000 cash, if you can think about that, that's going to be about as heavy as a kilogram. So we're going to use these benchmarks to decide how heavy is the mass of a paperclip. Is it about a baseball bat or a gram? And it's definitely going to be a gram. All right, last 5 problems together. We are looking at the problems on page 643, and we're going to use benchmarks to decide how we would measure each of the following items. So just to remind you of our metric units over here, length ends in meters, mass ends in grams, and liquid is referring to liters. So the mass of a strawberry is about a gram or a kilogram. So it's $1 or about a baseball bat. Definitely a gram. Length of a cell phone, your average size cell phone, centimeter, meter, or kilometer. Centimeters would definitely be used to measure the length of a cell phone, and we can abbreviate it with cm. Last three problems, we are circling the better estimate. So to measure the width of a regular sized teacher desk, 10 meters or 1 meter? 1 meter. The amount of liquid in a punch bowl, so think about your average punch bowl. Would it be 2 liters, meaning 2 water bottles, visualizing that water bottle, or would it take about 20 of those water bottles? 2 liters. And last problem, the distance between Seattle and San Francisco, 6 miles or 680 miles. So these locations are not even in the same state, so it is definitely going to be the greater amount. All right, here are your practice problems, numbers 6 through 9. They're located on page 643 in your math book. Have a good rest of your day.